This episode is brought to you by Hill's Pet Nutrition. Every shelter pet deserves a second chance, and you're making it possible for thousands of them every day. Because when you feed your pet Hill's, you help feed a shelter pet, which helps make them healthy, happy, and more adoptable, changing their life forever. So they can change yours. Over 14 million shelter pets fed and adopted. Science did that. Visit hillspet.com/podcast to learn more.
You are listening to Women's Running Stories, the podcast where exceptional women runners share inspirational stories about their running experiences.
Hi, my name is Emily Durgin, and I am a professional distance runner for Adidas, and I live and train in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Yes, Emily Durgin is back on the podcast, and she is going to be telling the story of how it all went down at the recent USATF 10-mile National Championships, which just took place on April 6th in Washington, D.C. as part of the Cherry Blossom Race. And I wanted to bring Emily back on the podcast to tell her story about this race as a follow-up to the last race report she was featured in, where she talked about the 2024 Olympic Marathon trials back in February. I wanted to have her back because the Cherry Blossom 10-miler was a fantastic follow-up for Emily after the marathon trials. Yes, the 10-miler was a triumphant launch into the rest of the 2024 season. But before we hear more from Emily, I want to welcome you to Women's Running Stories. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of this podcast. And Women's Running Stories is a proud member of the Evergreen Network of podcasts. All right, so this episode is a race report. I do these for every single one of the USATF road circuit races. And this is a series of races that is put on every year by the USATF, the governing body of track and field and road running in the United States. And these road circuit races happen throughout the country all year long, and each race serves as a national championship for the distance or type of race that it is. In addition to racers being able to earn their stars and stripes, there are also cash prizes on the line, and athletes earn points based on where they finish that go toward the overall series championship, which is determined at the end of the year. And in this episode, Emily Durgin will be giving a race report on the USATF 10-mile National Championships. Like I mentioned, they just took place on April 6th at the Cherry Blossom Race in Washington, D.C., and this is the fourth event of the series so far. The year kicked off with the National Championship cross-country race, followed by the Olympic Trails Marathon. Next up was the 15-kilometer championships in Jacksonville, Florida, and this is number 4. And yes, I'm having Emily back because this is such a great follow-up to the race report she gave about the marathon trials. If you have not heard that episode, I will link to it in the show notes. But what you need to know is this. Emily had a great build-up to the marathon, and on the day, she gave it absolutely everything. But she did not have the day she dreamed of. What she did come away with was really important, though. While, sure, she was disappointed, but she had no regrets. Emily showed once again at that marathon that she knows how to leave it all out there when it counts. And she also knows how to not get bogged down by one disappointing race performance. And Emily came away from that marathon with a huge amount of fitness. It was also very early in the year. There is a lot of racing left to be done in 2024. So the only question was, how would Emily capitalize on her excellent fitness and her rock-solid approach to racing? The first answer, as it turns out, was crushing it at the Cherry Blossom 10-miler. And that is what this episode is all about. A few things to know before Emily tells her story. This championship is a little bit different than some of the other ones in that there are international athletes in the race as well. So the national championships is sort of a race within the race. Of course, American athletes would like to win overall, but they are also very focused on racing each other because the first American to cross the line wins the national title. Also, you will hear a few names thrown out, and I want to clarify who they are. Among the athletes on the international side was 2023 returning champion Sarah Chelangat of Uganda, and Emily mentions top racers Rachel, this is Rachel Smith, Annie, that's Annie Frisbee, and she mentions Kira D'Amato, who is the current American record holder for the 10-mile distance. Kira had been on the start list for the Cherry Blossom, but she did not end up racing. Emily also mentions British professional runner Callie, and that is Callie Hogger-Thackerty. And finally, Emily also does mention the 15-kilometer in Jacksonville, and that was the 15-kilometer national championship, which took place on March 2nd. I do have a race report about that event, and it features Annie Frisbee. All right, now let's get into it. Let's hear the story about how it all went down for Emily Durgin at the 2024 USATF 10-mile national championship, beginning with where things were for Emily after the marathon trials. Here to tell the story is Emily Durgin.
The following days after the trials, I'm sure a lot of athletes can relate that my mind was going in a million different directions. I actually remember messaging my coach like 3 different times being like, I want to go after this 10K standard on the track and I want to try to make the team on the track. And then and he was all for it, but he's like, okay, take a couple days. Like we can totally like sit down and plan out if you want to do a track season and run the trials and potentially try to go after that 10K team. I love it, but take a few more days. A few more days roll around and I'm messaging him again being like, you know what? I really think I want to go after a bunch of these shorter road races and really focus on a fast marathon in the fall. So it was really funny how like my whole like mind like played with me. As soon as I like didn't make that Olympic team, I'm like, oh, what's the next chance I can make the team? And that's on the 10K in a few months. And yeah, so I feel like my mind was just kind of racing. And then I had to really like step back and be like, does it really truly excite me to go try to make the Olympic team on the track? Is that something that I'm super passionate about? And the answer was no. So I really had to shift my focus and go after what excited me and what I knew I could, excel in. Because if you're not excited about something, you're probably not going to end up going after it full-heartedly anyways. So it's kind of funny. I have been wanting to run the Cherry Blossom race since, oh my gosh, COVID time. So that would have been like, I think that was 2020 when it didn't happen, or maybe it was like something around that. Anyways, I've been trying to get back to this race now for 4 years. And actually it would have been 2020 of the fall, Kira D'Amato put on with the Cherry Blossom race directors. She did the record attempt. And it was not the Cherry Blossom course, but it was called the Up Dog 10 miler. Anyways, she invited me out there and a few other athletes because in order for her to have like the record be eligible, she needed to have, I think it was like 3 other runners finish. So I went out to DC. This was still very much COVID times. So it was probably just when things were slowly starting to, with all the testing and whatnot, we were able to put on this little mini race. And I went out to DC and I ran the 10 mile with Kira and she ended up getting the record. So she ran 51:23 on that day and I ran over 54 minutes, right? And I was just like so happy. It was my first time racing in close to a year. So it was awesome. And then, since that race, I've always wanted to go back to Cherry Blossom, but the way that my seasons have just worked out over the past couple of years, it didn't work. So I remember once I decided like, okay, I'm going to forgo chasing this track standard. Let's organize a really fun road season and set me up to have a great marathon this fall. Yeah, so after I took a full recovery after the marathon, it was a really emotional build and, some personal stuff I had going on even in the build. So after the race, I took 10 days of absolutely no running. I was home in Maine with my family. So it was like a full reset. And then, did the easy running for about 2 weeks. So that kind of takes up almost a month right there. So then that put us so that would have been the rest of February. Okay, so that put us the first week of March. I went and ran that 15K in Jacksonville. And then that's kind of when we were like, all right, you were able to run this 15K race. I don't even know what it was pretty fast. We averaged, I think most of the time we were running like 5:10s. Anyways, that was kind of like our starter mark. So that was kind of, again, I hadn't really started my training. I was just easy running. I had done a few workouts. We got through that race and I knew that I was going to run Cherry Blossom. And I said, okay, this is going to be the focus. And my coach is really great. We kind of bounce ideas off each other. So I sent some races that I really wanted to focus on. And Cherry Blossom was one of these races for the next few months. And I wrote the 51:23 Kira's record next to the race. So he was like, all right, I'm all in, let's do the training in order to get you, as fit as possible for this. And clearly you didn't lose too much fitness. You went out and ran this 15K. So now we kind of just need to do some more specific work if you want to go after this record, which was me kind of getting comfortable running 5:0s. I live at altitude, so we kind of have to play with the pace a little bit. But I went out to San Diego for about 10 days and we did some speed work out there. So some faster 400 repeats, some mile repeats, and yeah, kind of just like jump started getting the turnover back in my legs. And then I came back to Flagstaff for the final. I think I had like another like 20 days in Flagstaff. And thankfully, I was able to have 2 key sessions, and one of them I did with Callie, who runs for Nike, and she's a British runner, and she's actually made the Olympic team in the marathon, but she was also running a 10-mile out in California the same day as me. So her and I did this really killer session together about, I think it probably would have been like a week and a half out from our race. And that was kind of like the key session that really like solidified that I was in shape to run, that 51:20 pace. Yeah, this is the first race that I went into that I truly did not care who else was racing. My goal was to, I wasn't worried about anyone else besides myself. And I really wanted to get this record. And if another person beat me on that day and they got the record, so be it. But I knew that it was going to be a fast race because I was going to make it one. So yeah, that's kind of was my mindset going into the race. And then, yeah, it kind of played out how it played out. Yeah, so whenever there's a race that I haven't done before, I'll always go and watch previous years. So I had never run the 10-mile race, so I didn't really know much about the course. So I went and watched last year's race and I kind of saw how that played out because I know they bring in really good international fields every year. At least 3 or 4 high quality international athletes will show up. And sure enough, they were there last year. But last year, what they did is the race went out super slow. And, the international athletes just kind of tucked in behind all the Americans. And about, I think it was like 5 miles into the race is when the woman that won like took off. Like she dropped a crazy like 5 to 6 mile. So in my head, I'm like, ooh, this is interesting. The winner from last year is coming back. Obviously, it's a big deal to win the race. So I was kind of prepared, like, you could just have some athletes sitting on you. And then when the initial field list came out, I saw that Rachel, Annie, and then Kira D'Amato were all in the race. So I was like, okay, like Kira's racing, she's always one that will at least like be on the pace or push the pace. And then if at least 2 of us are pushing the pace, then the rest will go with us. So I kind of was like playing out how it could go. Like I was prepared to have to do most of the work if I had to. And then things always change. Like race day, you show up and there's always more athletes there than you expect. And then there's, ones that end up not showing up. So that's why like you can look at a start list, but you should never get extremely attached to a start list because it always changes. That is something I've also learned. But anyways, so I was very prepared. My last workout, my coach was actually in Flagstaff. It was nothing crazy. I think we did like 4 by a mile and then some 400s. And he's like, okay, yep, you're super fit. Don't waste your fitness. When the gun goes off, just go run your 5. I think my pace that I was trying to run was like 5:0. In my head, I was like, as long as I run 5:05 to 5:10, like I should be somewhere around the record. He's like, go run the pace. Whatever happens, happens. So yeah, that was kind of my mindset going in. The gun went off, and I don't think I was ever really leading the race. It was quick from the start, but everyone was there. And then actually the international field, about after the first mile, they took off. So our second mile was like a 4:55. So in my head, I was like, wow, this is great. I'm just going to be chasing.
Fitness on display, but we are starting to see that front pack starting to form now, Paul.
Yeah, that is the defending champion, Chilangat, who's leading this group. So predominantly international group of women here at the front with our trio, it looks like, of American runners with Frisbee, Durgin, and Smith. Things kind of stringing out here in the early going. To be expected, the one thing that is often said,
I don't really have a specific training group. I'm under the belief, and I told my coach this, I'm like, I want you to write the training for me that's going to suit me the best. And then if for some reason I can overlap with someone, great, but I don't want us to change my training. And because of that reason, it ends up that I'm by myself a lot. But I think that, and even if he gives me a workout and I don't hit the specific pace that day because I'm by myself and it's windy and whatnot, I still think it's super valuable to be like, wow, I just was able to complete this workout. And, it's way harder to be doing 8 by a mile by yourself and then having company. Sure, you might have run 3 seconds faster a rep, but yeah, for me and for what I'm training for, I think that I get in these races, and then when I do get to run with people, it makes it that much easier. And then, as a lot of people have probably seen with American distance running, there's always going to be a part of the race where you're probably completely by yourself. So it definitely does help during those times that I've practiced kind of that grinding and just not letting off the gas.
Spicy, and you're seeing Emily Durgin doing a great job of putting herself right into the thick of it at this point. She said that she wants this race to be pretty aggressive. It's a pretty fair measure.
Yeah, so like I said, honestly, once, they started dropping those fast miles, in my head, I'm like, great, full gas, you're just chasing. So I was conscious about my pace, and I was actually splitting every mile. Because like I said, I did have a goal. I wanted to see how close I could run to the record. So that helped a little bit because I was kind of like, yes, I had people in front of me, but then once a few of the women started to come back to me and I caught up to them, in my head was like, oh, you can't slow down because, like I said, my goal, I wanted to win the US title, but I also wanted to run a really fast time.
So this is racing at about 51-minute pace. So this is quick out of the gate, and Durgin, you see with the USA on her back, is now taking this race on her back and leading those 2 Ethiopians. We'll go to the second.
So that's kind of why it probably always looked like I was pressing and they were just staying on me, because once I caught up to them, I was very cautious about, you need to keep pressing in order to get the record. So with that being said, it was helpful, I suppose, because there was the woman in first that was always right there. And then there was 2 that just tacked on me and really just stayed on me through about 8 miles. And yeah, I kind of was playing mind games with my head. I was actually telling my coach this the other day because it did get, I'm not sure for people that have run Cherry Blossom, the first 6 miles go by like super quick. And then you kind of have this long stretch from like mile 7 to 9. And there's just like not many spectators. It's a long straight. It's always the wind's always in your face. And I had remembered this from watching the video from last year, how their splits started going like way the other direction. So I was mentally prepared for those, final 2.5 miles to be a grind. And they were.
Alongside Durgin. Again, Durgin really, reminiscent of kind of how we see Sarah Hall run a lot of her races. It's just kind of like reckless abandon at this point, but she's, despite what looks like fatigue, she is in control and clearly feels like she's in a spot to do something special here today.
That's a great point.
So I was kind of like playing mind games with my head, being like, all right, half a mile on, half a mile off, like trying to like break up the race. Like instead of being like, oh my gosh, you still have 3 miles to go, I was like breaking it down into like 800-meter sections. And I think that, I don't know, I think they might have said that it looked like I surged at one
Push right behind her. Just clicked her watch there at mile 8. She knows exactly where she is and looked like Paul. She threw in a bit of a surge. Look at the separation she got right when she hit that 8-mile point. She is basically, at this point in the race.
at one point, and it's probably because I was like trying to mentally trick myself and to be like, well, you're running in a headwind. These 2 people are sitting on you. Like try to like just kind of break up the pace, which is what I did. And unfortunately, I did have, I think it was like a mile or 2 in there that I fell off the pace. And that's why I ended up just being under or over the record. But pretty much the whole way I felt strong and consistent. And to be perfectly honest, I wasn't overly worried about anyone coming from behind because I knew that I had probably put such a big gap on early in the miles that even though the last final miles I did start slowing, there wasn't enough real estate left. But I knew Rachel was going to be closing hard, but yeah, thankfully I had a big enough lead that I was able to win the title. And honestly, it pulled a bunch of people to really fast times. It's pretty incredible that the top 3 were all 52 minutes or under. Like that's a very, very quick time for that course. I just remember, all of us finishing, me, Rachel, and Annie, and everyone being just so ecstatic, like with their time, like Annie set a PR in the 10-mile, and like that was Rachel's first 10-mile. And then, I think her husband noted that her and I had run, like we were like 2 and 3 all time, like in the US. Like it was just like very special that we all came away from that race, like super happy and super, joyful for one another that we had kind of leveled each other up and ran those fast times. And it kind of just set everyone up for a good rest of the year. So it's so fun to go to these races and see everyone. And yes, we're competing, but we're also like making each other better, which is really cool. So unfortunately, when I think it might have been I think it was 2 miles that I was off my pace. I don't exactly remember what I ran, but I knew it was like in the 5 teens where, I had been rolling like 5:06, like 5:09, and then I had one that was like 5:12, 5:13. I don't know. I think there was 2 slow miles. So honestly, when I hit the last mile, I had thought that I was way off the record. Like I was like, oh man, like I was like, well, as long as I break like 52 minutes, this will probably be a good day. So then like the last, I don't even know, 100 meters, I saw the clock and I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize that like our first like 10K of the race, like we were cruising. Like I was way under, because I think like I said, just because we dropped a few of those very quick miles early on, like I was like well under the record until those final few miles. So with like 100 meters to go, I saw the clock and it said whatever, like it was like, because I think the winning time, she ended up beating me by like 10 seconds. So I think she ran like 51:14, 51:15. So I saw her finish and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so close. But by that by that point, it was, I had obviously run out of time, and I crossed the finish line. And I thought at first I might have like tied it, because I thought I saw like the 51:23. And then it ended up being like the 51:26. So to be perfectly honest, yes, it is unfortunate. I probably shouldn't have been so like down about those 2 slow miles, and just kind of focused, because then maybe the last mile, if I knew I was still close, I could have done something. But you always say that. So it was, like I said, it was my first national title. And it's funny, like I've always said to my dad, it's like, when I win my national title, like I don't want it to just be like an easy win. Like, because I always joke, it's like, oh, every time I show up to these races, like there's always like the Kira D'Amatos, the Rachel Smiths, Emily Sis. And I'm like, why is there just not going to be one that like, it's like an easy win? But then I was like, we were joking and saying like, well, no, we don't want it to be an easy win. Like when I win my first title, like I want it to be like, okay, this was something special. And this was something like big. So I think that also going to this race is like, yes, I wanted to win a title, but I also wanted to put up a quick time. And if I was going to win, it was going to be fast. And if I was not going to win and someone was going to beat me, I was going to make them have to run fast. So yes. I remember like when I was going out to DC to have Kira run this record. I forget what the record was before. I think it was like, she smashed it. I think it might've been like 52 something. But anyways, like how she, like her goal was to run, like 5:08 pace for 10 miles or faster. And I remember hearing that and being like, that is absolutely crazy. But I was like, it was just mind blowing. And then the course that we did, it was kind of like a loop. So it was like a out and back, and we did it a few times. So just like watching her the entire race, just like click off, because again, she didn't have like a pacer or anything, because it was the women's only record. So you can't have like a male pacer or anything like that. So she was just like clicking off these 5:0 miles all by herself. And I was just like so amazed, and not that like, I don't know. I think that's the thing with me, is I've never set limits on myself. Like I just like thought like, wow, like, Kira's doing it, like someday, like I'm going to be able to do that. So yeah, it's kind of funny that it came full circle that, like not even 4 years later, and I'm like out here chasing this time that 4 years ago, I probably couldn't have even run, 4 miles at that pace. So yeah, it's really cool to reflect on, but it's also one of those things that like I said, because I don't set limits, it's like, wow, okay, well, yeah, now I want to go after the American record in the half marathon and this. And I think that that's just like, it's really cool that we kind of keep leveling up the game in American distance running.
That does bring us to the end of Emily Durgin's race report on women's running stories. And a huge congratulations to Emily on her incredible win. What a spectacular performance for her first national title. And, I picked up a few fun facts about this race that Rachel Smith shared, and one thing she pointed out is that Sarah Chalangat, with her finish of 52:14, broke a 26-year-old course record. And certainly her performance helped inspire the fast finishes of everybody who came behind her. Because yes, Emily and Rachel are indeed second and third on the all-time list of fastest American women to run the 10-mile distance. And they are the only 2 Americans to run under 52 minutes at this event. I will also mention that I featured Rachel Smith on the 2023 race report for the USATF 5K National Championships. That was a great race for her, and I will link to it in the show notes. I will also link to Annie Frisbee's episode about the recent 15-kilometer national championships, and of course I will link to the race report featuring Emily Durgin at the 2024 Olympic Marathon Trials. And I know you, like me, are going to want to keep up with Emily Durgin on social media, so look for that link in the show notes as well. Emily has a full year of racing ahead, including the upcoming 25-kilometer national championships on May 11th in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She is also running the Boulder 10K, which she won last year. And she said she's going to do some other 10Ks during the summer. And her big marathon coming up toward the end of the year is the Valencia Marathon on December 1st. I wish Emily huge success in all of her upcoming races. All right, one last item, a quick update of the standings for the USATF Road Circuit Series. The overall standings for the top 5 look like this. Emily Durgin and Rachel Smith are tied for first with 27 points. Emma Grace Hurley, she's been on the podcast twice. She's in third with 19 points. Annie Frisbee is in fourth with 18 points. And tied for fifth are Wayne Kaladi, who is the current cross-country national champion, and she is the current American record holder in the half marathon. And she is tied for fifth with Fiona O'Keefe, who was the winner of the USATF Olympic Marathon Trials and is headed to the Olympics this summer. And Wayne and Fiona both have 15 points. The next race report, which will cover the USATF 1 Mile Championships, which just took place on April 23rd in Des Moines, Iowa, will be coming soon. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss it. Thank you so much for being here. I always appreciate you listening. That does bring me to the end of this episode. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of Women's Running Stories. And until next Tuesday, I do wish you joyful, healthy, strong strides forward.
Women's running. Women's running stories.
Hear Her Sports is a podcast for everyone who loves stories by and about women striving to improve and make a difference in their lives. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery, a former professional cyclist. In every episode, I introduce a female athlete or woman in the business of sport through a thoughtful conversation about who they are and the terrific work they're doing. My guests and I explore the glorious and frustrating issues in sports, history, equity, training, nutrition, and so much more. Join us for inspiration, for community, and for love of being a strong, athletic woman.